Humans are funny in that this amazing technology, to some degree, we're just constantly trying to find out better ways to use it, and also setting higher expectations of what it can bring. So you can imagine for our joint customers at Microsoft and CluedIn, it's no surprise that one of the big things they're wanting to do is instill their own data into these large language models. And although that's a very inspiring and ambitious and obviously innovative and valuable thing to do, you can imagine how scary and chaotic that would be when you unleash an ungoverned data set into that world.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Masters of Innovation with an old friend of mine, someone I've been on stage with before from CluedIn, and that is Tim Warzer. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time.
Pleasure to be here, Alex.
It's pretty awesome, and Tim, maybe we could start with your background. You've actually got a really interesting background in engineering and actually the whole data story. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your story and then also CluedIn as an organization.
Will do. So for your audience, my name is Tim Ward. Today I am the CEO of CluedIn. We focus on a category called master data management, and my background, as you alluded to, is in engineering as a computer scientist, and I've focused the majority of my career on either product engineering or product ownership or product architect, and now I've got the pleasure of leading the CluedIn team. And it's in a space that is somewhat exciting and developing on a regular basis. And so just pleasure to be here.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And, data is an interesting one where like everyone talks about it. Everyone says this is the most important thing since, like people, it's the new oil or whatever, right? And there's all these kind of buzzwords, but, data's been around for quite a while, but there's been a clear kind of journey that we've been on. If we wind back, say like 30, 40, well, I guess even maybe longer than that.
Yeah, it is,
we started with these kind of warehouses, right? Maybe we could start there. What is a data warehouse and how do we use those in those days, right?
Yeah, you're actually right on reflection. Even the master data management space is 30 years old, probably actually even a little bit older. And so, in technology, there's obviously these evolutions and cycles we've gone through. And, from our exposure to the market, one of the things that we've seen is that inherently we've got a lot of amazing technology to yield some value out of data. Yeah, you're right. It started in integration and data warehousing, and some of the first initiatives that seemed to like the kind of easy to fruit to pick from was get some nice reporting and generating insights out. Hence, things like data warehouses were born. Obviously, it's gone through some type of evolution, and even in our space in master data management, there's been a clear evolution that it's been going through. One of the themes that we've seen kind of in the market and very much I've been exposed to as well is that if we look back through the history of this data technology, and I'm specifically talking about data technology now, not just technology in general, is that it has historically been something that's inherently been implemented and operated within predominantly IT and engineering teams, right?
But mostly because they're the ones that have that kind of technical nous. And I've been in IT departments and the business are just like, I don't understand this, you guys deploy that, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of empathy for the both teams, I guess, in that. And, let's not forget, IT and engineering play a critical role in the overall pipeline or supply chain of data, and they will continue to play a role in the future as well. One of the kind of it's a great question, because the kind of evolution of what's happened in the data warehouse space is something similar to what's happening in the kind of data governance space right now, is this pivot towards a focus much more on flexibility, agility, ability to kind of adapt to the natural entropy that happens in a business, right? Change is just one of those constants. And this is not historically the case. I think we've had a history in the data stack of control. Real rigid control, and with the idea if we are somehow able to wrangle that and control that world, that it'll be predictable downstream. And I think you smile because I think the last 10, 15 years has proven it's been quite hard to actually achieve.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think there's many organizations in the world that feel that they have their data completely under control and fully understand it. And I think, interesting the point of kind of that IT and business, because I think with a warehouse, in some ways you could say that's business led because it's all about insights, optimal for reporting and stuff like that. And that's really where it came from, right? Because we have all this data, we want a dashboard, and a warehouse is really kind of set up pretty well to establish that, right?
Business initiated,
Yep.
implemented and operated
By
in
technology.
IT.
Yeah.
And to your point before, they have the skill sets, and to be honest, something like a warehouse should be wielded by someone in IT. And if you kind of look at the kind of chasm of what data governance brings in, the real kind of overall concept of that was the first initial ideas of how do I bring the business in. And it's funny that, you've got to have something that triggers you to start a company. And at CluedIn, what really got us into this space of data management, and specifically master data management and data quality, was one of the first lines in the Wikipedia definition of master data management. And to be honest, for me, you don't even have to read past that first sentence to kind of buy into it. And that sentence is, master data management is the concept of bringing the business and IT together. And I'd say there's a lot of foresight there, that 30 years ago there was this feeling that harmonizing those teams and letting them both play some significant role together in the data supply chain was important enough. And I think technology takes time.
Yeah.
It sometimes takes time to evolve, and we have to remember that the reason why we need the business involved is not necessarily because they can help us out on the technical tasks. It's because they're buried in the lines of business in the day-to-day.
Technology is always an enabler.
It is an enabler.
There is no technology, and this is even just outside of data, that really makes any sense if it's not driving business value.
Correct.
When we're talking about enterprise kind of technology, so the business need to be involved in some form because ultimately they're the customer. They're the end customer of these insights, these reports from stuff like data warehouses, and I think that reporting side, in the last 20, 30 years prior as well, as we started moving from a reporting lens into a more kind of machine learning and data science kind of background, the warehouses weren't necessarily optimal for those kind of use cases. So that's where I guess we've got these data lakes kind of coming through, right?
When evolution of technology comes from a natural source, that's often a good indication it's the right direction to go in. And, for me, I think we've seen, to your good example, we've seen the business as consumers of data. Makes sense.
Yep.
They are the predominant producer of data as well.
Yep.
They're the ones creating new customers, creating new service desk tickets. These are the lines of business that fall outside of IT and engineering, where we think the importance is going and where the market is needing to go is to bring that same line of business into the actual supply chain, not just as producers and consumers, but as somehow owning part of the responsibility chain as data gets proliferated throughout the business.
I think that's key. And I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, with these data lakehouses and with data science and stuff like that is it's quite complicated. And some of the tooling that's obviously been provided has been very much with an almost assumption that technology, that you maybe know command line or coding languages. I guess one of the biggest challenges from a UX perspective is if we're going to get the business involved, it needs to be easy to use, right?
I think we mentioned this before, but I have a lot of empathy for both of the teams.
Yeah.
And somewhat sympathy for them as well, in that I think historically what we've done, and this is the natural evolution of technology, is unfortunately the tooling, the technology we've provided is often a little bit too technical to actually wield.
Yeah.
And we maybe forgot the kind of initial idea of why we needed to involve the business, and it wasn't because they know what a good email looks like, or they know what a valid phone number looks like. What we wanted them is to come in and bring their business IP that IT aren't aware of. Something as simple as, looking at a list of customers and being able to say, that's not a customer. Where did that come from? And poor old us in IT and engineering are just trying to do our best to compose this data. And sure, in IT and engineering, we can produce velocity and we can produce scale and predictability and robustness, and we should continue to do that. And where we depend on the lines of business to help us out with is that actual day-to-day minutia of I'm buried in the lines of business, and also the big one, the responsibility.
Yeah.
The responsibility of
Who
rubber
owns
stamping
this?
that before it goes out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's key. And you know, we touched on it, like everything's driven by kind of business, and so we need to have their kind of insights to actually make good decisions as technologists. Really interesting. And I guess even from that data science perspective, when we talk about data lakes and things like that, like data science isn't like the thing. It's the prediction of like for the consumer, right?
Yes.
So if you think about it from a movie perspective, like the machine learning stuff is really interesting because, you know, from a user perspective, like the end customer, like you just see, oh, this movie is recommended to me based on my previous history, and that's quite relevant. The business says, I just want to predict good movies for my customers, right? That's what the business wants.
Yeah.
And then the technologists are like, okay, now we need to do machine learning algorithms, and this is where the technology comes in. But like actually the real driver is the end consumer on the sofa that wants to watch a movie that's relevant to them.
I can't emphasize this enough. Every data initiative should be driven back to some key business metric. And that's often, you know, I've been exposed to enough projects to have built up enough scar tissue to know some good advice and good input and things to do and not to do. And I would say technology is very down low in the order. The number one piece is tie your initiatives to some key measurable business metric. And so I have the fortune of evolving in my career up from engineering to running a company. And it turns out that running a company is still run off some very small amount of key business metrics.
Yep.
There's a lot of complexity behind it.
Of course.
But there's a couple of key business metrics. And so I would implore anyone start data initiatives there. And enable with technology.
And you know, like the technology will come, right? Because like I run sessions all the time where we have customers coming in and they're like, AI is the new thing. We want AI, and I'm like, well, let's roll it back, right? You say you want AI. Let me just understand that, and then before you know it, it's like actually what you need is you've got loads of different things, and you need single sign-on.
Yes.
Because you're logging into loads of things and you're forgetting passwords.
Sure.
But AI is going to solve that. No, actually, there's a different technology that could probably help you there. It's
so
quite
this is probably a contrarian thought in this space, but. I think you often hear in the market that technology is an enabler, and it's those other pillars that are probably the pivotal, if not more, the complex parts to solve. I'll end the particular question you asked with one statement, which is, I'll tell you what helps really good technology.
Yeah.
In that you definitely don't want to be in a state where the technology is dictating how you do things, but it goes without saying, a good technology can make the journey a lot easier.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And you know, just I guess we've jumped around, and I love it. This is a great conversation. But when we close off that kind of history of data, right? We had the warehouses, but then the business driver. We need reports. So we had a technology that was really optimized for that. Then we had these recommendation engines for like movies and stuff like that. And like, oh, we need machine learning and data science to do that. Actually, a warehouse isn't really set up for that. We need these data lakes. Now we've got these kind of lake houses which are combining a little bit of both. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, obviously, like pioneered by the likes of Databricks, and now we've obviously got stuff like Microsoft Fabric.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about lake houses? And
there's a couple of first principles that I've learned in my career, and one is that there's no technology that's just the best. In fact, as engineers, as product developers, all we get is a whole bunch of dials to turn. And if we want to turn up speed, something else gets turned down without us doing it. If we want to lower costs, then something else gets worse. And so lake houses and warehouses, I don't think it's an argument about saying what is better. I think it's more of the lake house movement has definitely moved us towards embracing the natural chaos and entropy of a business that will happen.
Yeah.
And we traded probably kind of a little bit of predictability for this flexibility and agility. And I would say one of the key enablers in that was the cloud. And you might ask, well, how's that actually connected? And I always think of it as what the cloud brought is somewhat, for lack of a better word, a gluttonous nature to. We've got such easy access to services.
To literally anything,
yes.
right? You can build anything, and you can do it rapidly, and it's almost too much choice in some cases, I guess.
And you've seen these these logo slides out there in the market of what seems like an overwhelming amount of choice for the different categories. And once again, I have a lot of empathy for people that are needing to navigate that landscape. But with the Lakehouse piece, what the cloud brought is new architectures that said, hey, listen, you might not have to do so much of that upfront planning because you have to cater for hardware and scale. And, you know, if you want, I could give you a whole bunch of machines for 15 seconds and you'll pay for 15 seconds. And what that enabled was maybe we can now get more flexibility and agility without having to sacrifice too much.
We can scale up, we can scale down. We don't have to make massive capital investment.
Correct.
Huge kind of changes.
Correct.
Right? Cool. And I guess that's the key, right? With the warehouse very much optimized for reporting, the lake optimized for machine learning, and the lake house is a little bit of both. But if you're all in on reporting, lakehouse is not necessarily the right choice. Maybe it's a warehouse, right?
Correct. The pendulum swings in technology, and having somewhere in between feels like it's always the right place to be.
Yeah, totally, the most flexible. And you know, look, I think we've already talked about a few of the business challenges today, right? But maybe we lay them out. Like you guys have been working with customers like on all of their kind of biggest data challenges, understanding it. I mean, what are the biggest things that we're seeing? I mean, the IT versus business one, we've kind of touched at that, you know, we sympathize them with it. There's, you know, IT have their own kind of understanding, and you know, the business has their kind of drivers. I mean, you know, what are the biggest disconnects that you're seeing between those two organizations? Are they just not talking?
Yes, I mean, maybe the best way to say this is with an actual real life anecdote.
Let's do that.
If that's okay. So, I've been working with a company in Australia for the last few months.
Yeah.
And when we first went into discussions about understanding what problems they had, they talked me through a scenario where they have never been able to achieve just one single list of all the stores they have across Australia and New Zealand. And to be honest, we're not talking about an immense amount of stores. We're talking in the many thousands.
Right.
Okay, so not too overwhelming. This naturally came up by the fact that this company has come up through mergers and acquisitions.
Sure.
So they've acquired companies and not had that predictable on-ramping of
IT systems that are not fully integrated, data in silos, right?
Completely. Different tooling implemented by different people.
On different platforms?
Different platforms as well. And suddenly our world has to be composed or consolidated. So it's a complex challenge and definitely one that is targeted at being solved by a good modern master data management system. Now, the funny thing is they told me these stories early on in that because we're talking data, the immediate thought is over to IT.
Yeah.
So IT, knowing that they are not the managers or creators or producers of any of this data, give it a good go, right? Multiple systems, multiple ERP systems, giving it their best. And what it resulted in is IT handing over to the business kind of thinking, is it going to be quicker if I try to do this myself? Or is it going to be better if I iterate with the IT team? No, that's not right. No, you made a decision there that we shouldn't have made. No, those aren't the same customers. So this is not always going to be the same for every company, but the business said, thank you very much.
Yep.
I'll take it from here. Can you please send us the raw data as well?
Amazing.
And what we knew is, okay, well, they went off and tried to solve it themselves.
And so what was the outcome of that?
You can imagine it probably wasn't great.
No.
Because I think the business also underestimated the complexity involved in wrangling data. And so what it very clearly showed them was this symbiotic nature that needed to exist, this harmony of we both need to play our role in the supply chain. So 84 days into their project with the CluedIn platform, and this was also including some of the Microsoft tooling as well, they were not only to achieve a single view of all of their stores, they were able to accelerate through same list of products, a single list of their products. And this is probably one of my favorite use cases of recent times where what we actually identified is that when we looked at their store data and compared it to what the kind of like Bing Maps and Google Maps of the world had, we realized there was 170 stores that weren't on the mapping. But if you drill down into it, what it was touching on is there are certain business domains,
Yeah.
types of data in your business, you have to pay extra special care to, because the knock-on effect of getting it wrong, it's more than getting analytical data wrong, or it's
Totally.
more than getting transactional data wrong. It could lead to genuinely hitting the bottom line in returns of revenue raised or costs lost. So big impact when it happens.
So we've just talked about IT, the business, the challenges, and obviously a great customer example there. I think we actually touched on in that story quite an interesting point, which was data silos to a certain degree, right? To what extent do we think that is a critical problem that organizations have? Like you said, there's organizations that are by acquisition, and by nature, you're by each acquisition creating silos. I mean, how much of a challenge in the kind of data world are these silos?
Going to what we were talking a little bit about before, number one, I would say is that by proxy of that example, you should go out into your data initiatives knowing that naturally there will be this entropy you can't control. And so that's, I think, why also we've seen the movement in the new types of warehouses and lakehouses that have come out, but also why you've seen the modernization in MDM and data quality that have both said, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, that didn't work out well. And the reason is because often you don't know that around the corner is a triangle and a star, something you can't predict. And so data silos will always be a challenge, but I think betting on the foresight that that's something that won't stop. There's not going to be this kind of point where everybody is aligning on the same structure for objects. It's just never going to happen. And so going into the challenge of data silos, I would always go in with this idea of we have to embrace the chaos and be able to deal with it instead of trying to somehow whip it into control.
It's like you hit the hammer down one place, another thing pops up, right?
100%.
And I think if we get into whack-a-mole, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. But to your point,
we can try.
We can try. I think whack-a-mole will only get you so far. But to your point, there is some inherent complexity in organisations, especially at large scale, where instead of necessarily just trying to whack-a-mole everything, having a layer of governance over the top, and accepting some of the nuances, I think is key.
And it's very much it's also a combination of there is some level of governance and policies you want to be able to enforce, and then the rest is about being able to adapt and be flexible. And in the good old data warehouse versus the lake house approach, I think that's just such a great analogy of taking that kind of traditional upfront approach of saying, this is how I want my data to look like in a perfect world. And then actually realizing your whole world does not and will not look like that in the future. I think it added a certain level of, for the first few months, it really felt like warming, like you were getting somewhere. And unfortunately, it usually got derailed when you then started to kind of pull back the curtain and realize our world doesn't look like that anymore.
And I think it's interesting. I've certainly seen it in IT departments where if you have a really good kind of data department, that hides some of the inherent problems that you have, right? If you have some really good, Power BI guys or some really good, like data science guys, it's interesting that that can hide a lot of the inherent problems that are underlying that need to be ultimately resolved, right?
Correct.
Cool. And we touched on a few points around master data management or MDM and data governance. Maybe we could level set on what we mean by those terms, because I think one of the problems with data is that there's so many kind of buzzwords and people kind of throwing stuff around. So data governance, what is data governance to you, Tim? How would you define data governance?
So I actually think depending on who you ask, you might get a different type of answer on this. The way we think about it at CluedIn is very much that data governance is the umbrella of which many different kind of sub-practices exist. MDM, I would consider one of those sub-practices. It's under the umbrella. Just like data quality. Unfortunately, there's probably another 40 subcategories there. So it's quite a large surface area. Microsoft obviously have their Microsoft Purview solution, the umbrella, and it encapsulates some of the pillars, cataloging, workflow, some of the defensive elements around privacy and security. For me, data governance and I think this is a contrarian view on it, actually. I don't think this will be in any Wikipedia definition or even shared by a lot of other companies in this space. I really see it as this rubber stamp that says this is the tooling and the technologies and the practices that are really targeted at bringing the business in. This is and not as the initiator of the project or the thing that we're wanting to achieve in the business, but more as that's their way to play their role in the supply chain of data. And there's a big supply chain of data. It's a very small part of that, but having that importance of having people from the lines of business come in, add the layers of responsibility. That's what I see as data governance.
And it's a very interesting point because we've definitely touched on that IT business. Is data governance the way that we bring the business into data?
I think it is. I think it's their chance to, carve out a part in the overall very complex layers of data to say, this is meant for you.
Yes.
We have carved out this place because we know how important it is for you to come in and instill your business IP into this data. However, I'm not going to ask you to be technical.
No.
I can't ask you to know how to write Python or traditionally even things like
SQL queries.
SQL queries. A classic one in the MDM and data quality space was these very intuitive rules engines that would ask you to write things like regular expressions. With my engineering background, I still have no idea how to write these things, and I'm 20 years
Don't ask
deep.
me. Do not ask me. Even SQL queries.
This is one search engine query away from an answer, but nothing that's just instilled in us. And so, obviously, this is also where AI starts to make a big jump in bridging that chasm of, do I still require them to maybe translate their intent into something technical?
Yeah.
How's that going to happen?
Totally. And you touched on AI. Let's get straight into it, right?
Sure.
AI. We mentioned that machine learning side of things. It's not new. The large language models, however, are obviously in the last kind of 2 or 3 years, kind of pioneered by the likes of OpenAI. How important is data in that kind of whole life cycle?
So, I think there's somewhat a circular, if not recursive, nature of that we need AI to solve the data problem.
Sure.
And we need to solve the data problem to help with the AI pieces. And so there's this almost symbiosis that exists there as well.
Totally.
I think the way that that's kind of showing through right now, I think, is early days in that, naturally people are aware that the initiatives that we are running in AI, we probably won't be able to see them go into any production state without having a good foundation in place. And so it's just, in a way, kind of ironic, but in hindsight, not. But I'll still follow that path of, it's quite ironic that that our lack of data quality, our lack of data integrity is going to be aided by AI in order to actually self-fuel. But let's be honest, isn't that the best type of relationship that should exist, in that fixing one fixes the other and so forth? And so we at CluedIn, we've invested very early in the large language models. And to your example, machine learning's been around for a while. I mean, hand on heart, I would say that the previous eras of machine learning, it was maybe nowhere near as economically viable for a lot of companies.
Just in terms of resources, and we could talk about the actual technology, but it's actually in terms of even just a headcount.
Correct.
Right. How many times I've had customers coming in and they say, "Oh, we can't do that because we've worked it out. We just don't have the budget and headcount." And then I say, "Actually, what's the problem? Okay, let me just pull up the playground. Let's go into a large language. Let's talk to GPT-4o." And I just put in a few prompts without any code, and they're like, "Oh my God, that literally does the thing that we need it to." Where has this been for the last 10 years? Right?
Yeah, and in specifically in the master data management and data quality space, you'd usually categorize the different solutions as being either deterministic, probabilistic.
Sure.
And what large language models have often they've brought in is this concept of being heuristic in nature, where there's no necessarily
it's not
pattern
necessarily
to look
right
for.
or wrong.
It's
in
not
some
right
case.
or wrong.
Yeah.
But it's handling these edge cases that before, even with the machine learning evolution that happened 2015, 2017,
Sure.
etc. I just could not see it as the return of investment you would get from having to build it and then maintain it and have teams on it. Now that is drastically changed now with the large language models, to the point where even me, the good old pessimistic software engineer, looks at something like large language models and say, like, I am just amazed and continue to be amazed by what it can do.
It's absolutely mind-blowing, and it's the multimodal capability. You throw voice at it, throw images at it, throw text at it. It just can respond and give really good answers pretty quickly. And it's the low code or lack of code that really kind of blows my mind every time. And it's I've said this a few times that, like, with AI, it's interesting that for years we've had to learn how computers work, right? We've had to talk to computers in computer language. We've used coding languages and things like that, even just keyboard and mouse. Now with these large language models, it's almost like learning how we interact, right? And so it's just a lot more natural. And to our point constantly about bringing the business in, a large language model makes a lot more sense to a business user than for example, machine learning.
In saying this, the form factor of the technology, one of the ironies of it is that it surfaces bad data quality more than any other form factor I've seen. I mean, often I can hide a bad set of data behind beautiful pie charts.
Sure.
Right? You can kind of, you see the colors, it looks like there's an even distribution, and okay, until you dive in and you realize that can't be right. The chat form factor, it more than any other will surface things, and you just spot and you just go, no,
something's wrong there.
There's something's wrong. And so you can imagine for our joint customers at Microsoft and CluedIn, it's no surprise that one of the big things they're wanting to do is instill their own data into these large language models. And although that's a very inspiring and ambitious and obviously innovative and valuable thing to do, you can imagine how scary and chaotic that would be when you unleash an ungoverned data set into that world. And so it's just, for me, it's accelerated and it's exacerbated the need to solve the foundation.
I love that framing of that symbiotic relationship, using data to fuel the AI and the AI to fuel the data problem, or to solve for it. I think that's really, really quite powerful. And obviously the large language models are one capability. What we're seeing a lot is these kind of AI agents, which are more capable. They actually can take action. At the moment with the large language model, it's mostly chat or some other interface, but an AI agent can actually take action. How are you guys looking at that? I know you with the CluedIn platform, there's a lot of kind of opportunities for that kind of stuff, right?
We invested in large language models so early, and I think it's because we just saw something, a pivotal quantum leap in what was capable. And then fast forward to today, and aren't we funny people? Aren't we just funny? Humans are funny in that this amazing technology, to some degree, we're just constantly trying to find out better ways to use it, and also setting higher expectations of what it can bring. With the agentic nature, we're spending tons of time in this, and actually very, very soon at the Microsoft Ignite conference in November, we will be unveiling our agentic framework as part of this. And so then in the realm of master data management, what does this mean? What value does this bring? Well, it's funny. I think I alluded to it a little bit before in that, at the end, I think Satya says this, that I won't get this quote perfect, but I'll definitely get the guts of it fine, which is, it's really about being a co-pilot, not an autopilot.
Sure.
And same with the agentic natures as well. For me, I don't see it as an autopilot. In fact, I would really today be extremely concerned about an agent booking my flight and booking me in for dinner, and to the point where I would need to see what you're doing before I actually commit to it.
That human in the loop kind of concept,
Human in the loop is so important. And then it comes back to why we are investing in AI agents. And the first thing is, the truth is, I don't necessarily need humans to help out with the general data quality issues. Like that an email should be this structure.
Sure.
and when it's not, that's a bad thing. Or that a phone number in the perfect world should be in this structure so we can easily call anyone without having to double check if we got the wrong phone number or anything like this. Just those are general data quality issues. It turns out the large language models know about these things. And so from our agentic framework, we're shipping with this kind of idea of agents that have roles, very, very well-known roles in MDM and data quality, such as a data steward, a governance manager, one that we're going to keep a little bit hush-hush until the Ignite framework, which is the concept of a data product owner and their responsibilities.
So are you giving us a secret?
That's a small exclusive that you got. You're welcome for your audience. Once you get me excited about technology, it's just hard for me to keep these things
it all under wraps.
Exactly. But for me, it's these agents. Actually, it's kind of, I feel somewhat a little bit unethical when I say this, but one of the scalable parts of it, they can work 24/7. And to have them go off and look for these common issues that are standards across, well-known standards, ISO standards, RFC standards, these are things these large language models know. I want my agents to do those tasks.
Yeah.
Because they aren't necessarily company or business specific. But what I still need and require the data stewards from the lines of business to come in is tell me about these data quality issues that no one in the world will be able to guess.
And I think it's to your point, the 24/7 nature I think is key, but it's also, in the cybersecurity world, it's an interesting one where you're getting thousands and thousands of alerts.
Yes.
No human can parse that and make any sense of that.
No.
But a prioritization from a large language model, then the human user comes into the loop, to your point, and actually can action and make decisions more informed, rather than actually, I've got so much stuff in front of me, I don't know where to even start. What we're saying here is these AI agents are saying, hey, maybe have a look at this.
I mean, I think it's always about picking the right tool for the right job, and clearly computers are more scalable as human than certain things.
Sure.
And to your example and your point is that the AI agents will naturally be very good at trawling through unstructured and structured data and finding these things. It'll know that Narnia is not a city.
Yeah.
And Hogwarts is not a city. It'll know that this phone number is not an email address. But we need to make sure that the human component is in the loop to say, listen, you would have never guessed this. But when you see products and they've got a little hash at the end, that means we don't sell them anymore. And it's just because our ERP system didn't allow a certain column for it. No large language model in the world will ever know that.
But then you can say no human coming into that team would have known that anyway. It's additional context that we need to provide.
And that's why also someone buried in the lines of business that works with the product every day, they are part of that process of producing the products and getting them out there. I need their IP. I need their business knowledge. They're the ones that know how to treat that data.
Amazing. And Tim, this has been an amazing conversation. I just want to say, what's next for CluedIn? What's coming? And obviously you've got the Ignite conference, which we kind of alluded to.
Very excited.
But what's coming in data governance and for CluedIn?
So, I mean, our vision, and it just turns out that we share a lot of these with the Microsoft team.
Sure.
I've had the pleasure of working closely with the Microsoft Purview team and Fabric teams and some of the Azure AI Studio teams. One of the things we share is this importance of not only making data ready for insight, so by the time it's discoverable and we've got these amazing technologies we know that we need to feed data into, that you pick it up and you accelerate through. You don't have to be held back by the hurdles that are often introduced with low quality duplicate records, all these things that make us lack trust in actually utilizing the data. And so our vision at CluedIn is to make data ready for insight. We think one of the pivotal ways that that's going to happen is by solving this symbiosis between the business and IT, something that we've in the industry been trying to solve for 30, 40 years. We've always wanted to do that. And so what makes me feel like right now is the time to crack this is not only has technology advanced just in general, but these large language models have bridged a huge gap in literacy, but also translating from someone's intent to what the underlying technology actually needs to do its job.
Totally.
And so for those few reasons, You're going to see from the CluedIn a lot of investment in the Microsoft ecosystem, a lot of interest in making sure that we play a pivotal role in that data governance layer. And I, for one, am pretty excited about.
I think the future is quite exciting, and I think we're getting to that point with data where we need insights, we need AI, we need all these things. But data is becoming even more critical, and our understanding of it and our kind of layer on top of that governance is absolutely crucial.
Agreed.
And so, Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Alex.